Hey guys, welcome back to another Remnant 2 video. Today we're continuing our new game Apocalypse Archetype ranking series, where we look at each of the archetypes starting loadouts on a brand new character, and test it against roughly the first hour of an Apocalypse run. Just like before, we'll be scoring these archetypes based on 3 metrics: effectiveness, fashion, and fun factor. If you haven't seen at least part 1, I recommend starting there, since I give a more detailed explanation on what exactly these scores represent. But to quickly summarize, effectiveness is how well the character generally performs, fashion is how good the character looks while staying at blue equip weight, and fun factor is how much fun I had while playing. And before we begin, just a few quick reminders. This score does not consider the in-game effectiveness of an archetype. This is only about a brand new character starting from scratch on the hardest difficulty. Do not use this video as a guide to theorycraft your level 20 character. Also, these tests are not performed equally across all characters. Some characters will start in different worlds as others, and therefore will encounter different challenges. Some characters are simply better under different conditions, but it's important to capture that randomness factor that is core to the Remnant experience. And of course, everything in this video is purely from my point of view, and is just my opinion. I play a lot of Remnant, so what's good for me is not necessarily good for you. Okay, so with that out of the way, let's move on to the first archetype of this video. First up for today's video is the Invader, and they have a very impressive starting loadout. They start with the Coach Gun, the Service Pistol, and the Steel Katana. They get the Dendroid armor set, and their starting ability is Void Cloak. When active, Void Cloak will cause your character to automatically dodge all attacks for 60 seconds. Each time that Void Cloak triggers, it reduces the duration remaining based on how much damage was avoided. It also creates a lingering decoy for 3 seconds, which can keep enemies distracted, giving you time to reposition or counterattack. Void Cloak has a pretty long 75-second cooldown that doesn't begin until after the effect wears off, so it's good to save this ability for tense situations. In my opinion, Void Cloak is one of the strongest abilities in the game. When used correctly, Void Cloak can essentially give you an extra life. I have used it a ton during my Losing is Fun challenge runs, and I'm happy to report that it's just as good at level 1 as well. The prime perk for the Invader is Shadow. Shadow leaves behind a decoy each time you use an Invader ability, and also grants a small damage boost against enemies who are not targeting you. If I'm being honest, I think this perk is just not very good. It gets a little better when combined with the Invader's level 5 ability, Wormhole, but it's not very useful with Void Cloak, and honestly, decoys are just not good enough on their own. Moving on to armor, the Dendroid set is probably the best light armor set in the game. You can wear the whole set while staying at blue equip weight, and it looks great. As for our starting gear, I went with the Black Cat Band and Onyx Pendulum. The Black Cat Band can save us from a single otherwise fatal attack, with a 2-minute cooldown. When combined with Void Cloak, you'll essentially get 2 to 3 extra chances in a row, so you can play a little more recklessly. The Onyx Pendulum is a necklace that rewards alternating between your weapons during combat. Landing hits with one gun will give you a temporary damage boost for the other. It stacks up to 10 times, giving a maximum of 25% bonus damage. My plan was to use the Service Pistol to stack damage for big hits with the Coach Gun, but apparently the Onyx Pendulum only allows 1 stack added per second, meaning I could typically only get 1 to 2 stacks added at a time. If I had known this, I wouldn't have chosen the Onyx Pendulum, so in hindsight I would recommend either the Dran Scavenger Ring or Butcher's Fetish. For our starting mod, I went with Hotshot. Hotshot will give our Coach Gun a large boost in damage when active, as well as an instant reload, which is valuable since our Coach Gun has a slow reload. Speaking of which, the starting long gun for the Invader is the Coach Gun. The Coach Gun is a double-barrel shotgun with high damage and a fast rate of fire. It fires slugs rather than the traditional buckshot, so there's no managing your spread, but you'll still need to be somewhat close to your targets. The biggest flaw of the gun is its slow reload, which, when combined with its meager 2-shot capacity, makes for a lot of downtime when using this gun. But even still, this gun's damage absolutely makes up for it. If you can play to the rhythm of the Coach Gun, it can absolutely overcome the most difficult encounters in the game. There is one glaring problem with the Coach Gun, which is that sometimes the shot goes directly through enemies. This can be quite bad, but it's not nearly as devastating as when it happens with certain other weapons. The starting handgun for the Invader is the Service Pistol. We have talked about the Service Pistol before, since it's also the starting handgun for the medic, so I'll only touch on how this gun works as part of the Invader's loadout. The Service Pistol is an excellent companion to the Coach Gun. While the Coach Gun doesn't demand point-blank range like the Bulldog or Scattergun, it just isn't capable of handling distant threats. The service pistol fits this role perfectly and gives the Invader a long-range precision option when it's needed. Moving on to melee weapons, the Invader starts with the 𝐑𝗲𝐦, and this thing is excellent. It deals great damage, has fast swings, and can easily handle multiple enemies at a time. It even has a further forward range than you would expect. When used with a Void Cloak, this is a great option for thinning out groups of small enemies, or finishing off a large one. The boss of this run was the Huntress, and this fight went fairly well. The coach gun was able to deal significant damage to her, even staggering her sometimes, and the service pistol would handle her birds and keep pressure on her from a distance. So, with all that being said, let's review and give a score to the Invader. First up is effectiveness. Nearly everything about the Invader is excellent. It has great guns, a great melee weapon, a life-saving ability, and one of the best armor sets in the game. The only downsides to the Invader are the underwhelming Prime perk and the occasional accuracy issue with the coach gun. Otherwise, this is as close to perfect as you're going to get effectiveness-wise. So for that reason, I'm giving the Invader a 9 out of 10 for effectiveness. Next up is fashion. The 𝐑𝗲𝐦 armor set looks great and meets our blue equip weight requirement. What more can I say? This is an easy 9 out of 10 for fashion. Finally, we have fun factor. The Invader is a blast to play as. The weapons are super satisfying to use, and Void Cloak gives you enough flexibility to have fun while doing it. I have to dock a point because missing a shot with the coach gun is definitely not fun, but otherwise this class is peak enjoyment. So I'm giving this a 9 out of 10 on the fun factor scale. This gives the Invader an impressive overall score of 27 out of 30, making this our highest scoring archetype in the series so far. The 8th archetype of the series is the Alchemist, and their starting loadout is interesting to say the least. They start with the Wrangler lever-action rifle, the double-barrel shotgun, and the bone chopper axe. They get the academic armor set, and their starting ability is Vile Stone Mist. When used, Stone Mist creates a vapor cloud that applies a buff to any friendlies that walk through it. The buff is called Stone Skin, and it reduces incoming damage by 25%, as well as reduces how much you stagger from enemy hits. Stone Skin also makes you immune to status effects, for what it's worth. The Vapor Cloud lasts 10 seconds, the Stone Skin buff lasts 15 seconds, and the ability itself has a 72-second cooldown. If you refresh the Stone Skin buff right as the Vapor Cloud is dispersing, you can stretch the buff duration to a combined 25 seconds. This ability can be great when used in endgame tank builds, alongside other damage-reducing effects, but as a level 1 ability on Apocalypse difficulty, this just isn't very good. The damage reduction by itself is not enough to be useful on its own, and the long cooldown means you won't be able to use this as often as you'd want. Comparing it to the Invader's Void Cloak ability, Stone Mist is just inferior in practically every way. The prime perk for the Alchemist is Spirited. Spirited allows you to have one additional active concoction. With concoctions being the strongest consumable items in the game, this is most definitely a very powerful perk. But concoctions are rarely found and are expensive to buy from Mudtooth. From the perspective of a brand new character, the little bit of money you may start with is better used on a permanent item, such as a ring or a weapon mod. Spirited is an excellent perk, but it won't do you any favors getting started with your new character. Moving on to armor. To get our armor set to a usable weight, we can remove the chest piece. It's a little dorky looking, but I still kinda like it. As for the rings, I went with the Black Cat Band and Dran Scavenger Ring. The Black Cat Band for the same reasons as before, and the Dran Scavenger Ring because it applies a small, but very useful amount of health regeneration. For the starting mod, I went with Hot Shot. Just like when I said when ranking the Gunslinger, Hot Shot will help alleviate the slow reload speed of the Wrangler by giving us the option for an instant reload. And it gives us a big boost to our damage as well, which is always nice. Moving on to weapons. The starting long gun for the Alchemist is the Wrangler lever-action rifle. Like I said before, we've already covered this gun when we ranked the Gunslinger, so I'll only speak to how the gun works as part of the Alchemist's loadout. Without the Gunslinger's prime perk loaded, and without the free damage of Quick Draw, the Wrangler's flaws feel more significant. The poor reload speed hurts when you don't have an instant reload, and ammo runs out much faster without Quick Draw helping supplement damage. The Wrangler is still a good gun, that much hasn't changed, but it simply feels out of place as a starting gun for the Alchemist. The starting handgun for the Alchemist is the Double Barrel Shotgun. The Double Barrel is a 2-shot break-action shotgun that deals high damage but has high spread and short range. You can quickly fire off 2 shots in a row, but then you'll need to reload, which is unfortunately pretty slow. In a lot of ways, the Double Barrel is very similar to the Coach Gun. The low ammo capacity and slow reload speed begs for the same strategy. But unlike the coach gun, the spread is a big factor on how much damage you'll do, meaning you'll need to get close and stay close if you want this gun to work. And since you'll be sitting there waiting for your gun to reload anyways, you might as well just use your axe instead. Speaking of which, the starting melee weapon for the Alchemist is the Bone Chopper Axe. Although this weapon is very similar to the Scrap Hatchet, a weapon that I consider to possibly be the worst weapon in the game, the Bone Chopper is much better in almost every way. The Bone Chopper is still fast and still has the same narrow swings, but the damage is much higher and the range is a little bit longer. The weapon even seems to hit weak spots much more frequently. These small improvements all around make the Bone Chopper an excellent melee weapon, and I found myself using it quite often while waiting for my shotgun to reload. The boss of this run was Legion, and the fight was absolutely brutal. Legion was a hardy regenerator, and the Alchemist simply had no great option to keep the pressure on. The fight went on for nearly 6 minutes, possibly my longest Legion fight ever. I did manage to beat him on my first try, but it was no thanks to the Alchemist itself. So with all that being said, let's review and give a score to the Alchemist. First up is effectiveness. I'm just gonna say it, the Alchemist on New Game Apocalypse flat out sucks. The weapons do not complement the Archetype, and Stone Mist by itself doesn't provide enough protection to be truly useful. The Alchemist is clearly designed to be used in the late game, and as a result, it struggles to stand on its own without the right build supporting it. For that reason, I'm giving the Alchemist a 3 out of 10 for effectiveness. Next up is fashion. As I said before, this looks a little dorky, but it's certainly unique and I like the silly hat. So for that reason, I'm giving this one a 5 out of 10 for fashion. Finally, we have fun factor. In my opinion, the Alchemist is simply not fun to play as. I found a brief moment of enjoyment each time when blasting my 2 shots with a shotgun, and I also enjoyed hacking away at enemies using the Bone Chopper. But otherwise, the Alchemist is a chore to play as. So for those reasons, I'm giving the Alchemist a 3 out of 10 on the fun factor scale. This gives the Alchemist a very low overall score of 11 out of 30, making this the lowest scoring archetype in the series so far. And that's going to do it for this video. If you liked the video and want to see this series continued, please drop a like and let me know down in the comments below. Also, consider subscribing if you enjoy Remnant content. So I've had some time to think about the series, and I've decided I'm going to change the scoring method somewhat. For the sake of consistency, I didn't want to change it in the middle of the series, so instead I'll be doing a finale video, where I'll revisit all the previous scores, and then show how all the archetypes performed in the various categories. It could be interesting to see where all the archetypes land with the improved scoring system, so stay tuned for that. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.